completion of this section, you shall be able to identify and understand the function of the main parts of the actuator. Housing, rotor, stoppers, cover, radial bearing, rudder carrier. The actuator is situated on top of the rudder stock in the steering gear compartment. The rotor in the rotary vane actuator is mounted directly on the rudder stock. On the ram type, the tiller is fixed to the rudder stock. The rudder stock connects the actuator with the rudder. This is the rudder stock. It is tapered on top to fit the rotor. This is the rotor. It is mounted to the rudder stock by the use of a hydraulic jack. These are the bearings for the rotor, upper and lower radial bearing, and the rudder carrier. This is the actuator housing. These are the stopper mounting bars. These are the stoppers, which serve a dual purpose. Together with the rotor vanes, the stoppers divide the actuator into pressure chambers, and also make boundaries for the maximum rudder angle. This is the lower packing gland. This is the base for the actuator. This cover forms the top of the pressure chambers. This is the ring jack. It is used during installation to force the rotor onto the rudder stock. This is the rudder stock nut. This is the mounting plate for the angle indicator. This is the angle indicator shaft. This is the system oil expansion tank. This is the angle indicator wheel. These nuts lock down the cover stoppers and oil gasket. With these, the actuator is complete. Please be aware that this sequence for putting the actuator together is different from real life. Click on the split drawing of the actuator for information about the different parts. Angle indicator. This is fixed to the rudder stock and shows the rudder angle. Expansion tank. This tank serves as an expansion tank for the system oil. Rudder stock nut. This nut acts as a securing device for the friction connection between the rudder stock and the rotor. Stoppers. Make boundaries for the pressure chambers and also set the limits for the rudder angle to each side. Stoppers. Make boundaries for the pressure chambers and also set the limits for the rudder angle to each side. Rotor. This is the moving part of the actuator. It turns the rudder stock when the hydraulic pressure increases on either side of its vanes. It is fitted with spring-loaded cast iron bars. These are not exposed to wear. Housing. Serves as the outer boundaries, side and bottom of the pressure chambers. Rudder stock. This is the connecting shaft between the rotor and the rudder. Lower radial bearing. The lower radial bearing takes up radial forces in conjunction with upper radial bearing. It is made of brass. This bearing is lubricated by the system oil. Lower packing gland. This keeps the system oil from leaking down the rudder stock after the system oil has lubricated the lower side bearing and the rudder carrier. Ring jack. This is used during installation to force the rotor onto the rudder stock. Cover. The cover forms the top of the pressure chambers.